Bracing for the heat across the West and throughout California, I'm ABC 10 Chief Meteorologist Monica Woods out of the capital city of Sacramento. We're going to be unpacking all the impacts we'll be dealing with as we get into this heat wave that is followed up by the first one that started off the month of July for the holiday weekend. And now we're right back at it. Excessive heat watch in play Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Our highs are going to be between 98 and 113. This is going to be in record territory. And perhaps most notable are going to be the overnight lows, only dropping into the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So that's going to elevate that heat risk. Our bodies don't have a whole lot of time to recover from the daytime heat as we head into those overnight lows. And that's one of the trends that we've been following, where those overnights have been getting warmer and warmer over the past, say, 30 to 40, even 50 years. And unfortunately, that is taking a toll on how we recover from these heat waves. Today's highs throughout the state, you can see some of us already in those triple-digit territory as we head into the southern part of the state. Palm Springs, the hot spot there at 111 degrees. Most of us just kind of flirting with those 100s throughout the Central Valley. We hit 100 as well for Redding, but as we head right through the central part of the state, we were right about the mid to upper 90s. So this is going to be putting us on track to get into those 100s for the end of the work week and the weekend. So it's another weekend we'll be dealing with those 100s. You can see the color contours really shading into the well above average territory. Many of us will be sitting about 10 to almost 15 degrees above average. And when we talk about that, and especially this time of year when we tend to have our hottest time of the year, 10 to 15 degrees above average is going to be very dangerous. So fire danger will also be elevated here with easier fire starts, heat risk for people and pets. And then our waterways are still very cold and fast. So even though the air temperature is very hot, the waterways still very cold. So again, we're going to be unpacking all the impacts here. So as we get into some of the more dangerous conditions, it's a perfect time to sign up for the emergency notifications. Follow media on television and radio, also the wireless alerts, which are the local emergency alerts. You can get those on your phone. Follow the internet on social media and websites. Also, a NOAA weather radio is a great tool to have when perhaps your GPS goes out or your internet goes out. A weather radio can be the difference between life and death. And make sure contacts your family and friends know where you are, know where you're going to, what you're going to be doing, especially as we start to see our fire danger go up, particularly for the valley. Now, the valley having a higher fire danger tends to mean some grass fires. Those typically get under control pretty quickly, especially at this point in the season. We're running about 28 to almost 30 days behind that peak part of the year, and that's because of our very wet winter and even late spring. So that has helped to suppress some of the peak activity for the higher elevations, which can divert resources away from the valley when we have those grass fires. So just kind of some good news coming off of this very wet year. But preventing a spark is going to be key, especially as we head into this warmer stretch where grasses start to dry out more and more with each hour, actually. So mow lawns, not dry grass or weeds. Metal blades plus rocks equals fires. If a blade hits a rock, it can spark a new fire. Watch for dragging vehicle parts. We have time and time again covered stories where somebody is dragging or towing a trailer and they've got that chain dragging on the road. Well, that could be a spark. And unfortunately, with the dry grass on the side of the road, you can have that start a fire. Also, if you're having car problems, don't pull over in dry grass. That's another one to keep in mind, too. Sometimes that can cause a brush fire, which quickly spreads to the grassland nearby. A couple of things for the wildfire emergency items. It's a good time to prepare. I know we've had a delayed onset of that peak season, so it's still time to get some of these things together. Our survival needs with the first aid kit, medicine, food, and water for at least 3 days. Important documents. Want to make sure that those are secure. Proof of ownership for your home. Sometimes that's required to get back into a fire zone. Insurance, medical, and personal ID and fire-resistant safe. Your to-go bag. Have that ready and in the car in case of evacuation. And remember the pets, first aid kit, the carrier ID tag, food, leash, medication, medical records, and toys ready to go, because some of those facilities don't necessarily have all the needs for our pets. Again, we've had a really delayed start this year. Last year, we had over 7,000 fires burned, and our acres burned over 350,000 acres. Last year at this time, we had roughly the same amount of fires, but the acres, you can see, much larger, by about twice as much as what we had last year at this time. And again, because of how much rain and snow we saw over this past season, we are still seeing snow in the high country. I know it's hard to believe, but you can see the contours here indicating some pockets of snow still, and most prominent is going to be in the central and southern Sierra. Our averages are still 400 to almost 900% of average of what we usually see this time of year. And for the April 1st average, what we usually see right about the time that we have no more snow and everything starts to melt out, we're still about 4 to 6% of what we usually see in the April numbers. So a lot of snow up there in the high country. So statewide, we're at about 425% of average, 6% of that April 1st average. This was a picture taken just a couple of days ago up towards the central Sierra. Gary Hackworth sending that into our ABC 10 weather force. So Sierra summer snow still out there. Now, it's not entirely out of the question to have snow up in the high country this time of year. Is just how much snow is up there has been remarkable. So we are still tracking our snow melt. We've had about 10 to 20 inches of snow melt over the past 7 days or so. So cold water and swift currents still a part of the conversation. Some local roadways will still be dealing with some flooding this coming weekend because of the warm temperatures. And also you want to check those hiking trail access points. Some parts in Southern California have actually closed those off, in part due to the high temperatures, but also check them for the central and southern Sierra. Some of them were inaccessible just due to the snow, but they also may be covered with some water due to the snow melt. Now, snow melt is a big factor for us, not only because of filling our reservoirs and rivers, but it also can pose some dangers. That snow melts down elevation, and gravity will take it into the lower elevations here. So it heads into many of our very popular waterways for rafting and floating and swimming, but can make that very dangerous as well. Eventually, it heads into our reservoirs. Those are just two I was pointing out there. And then into Discovery Park and into the Delta, which, again, all of these areas, very popular recreation spots at this point in the year, especially when we're dealing with 100-plus degree temperatures. Our reservoirs looking really healthy at this point. We're at about 90 to 100% of historical average, I should say, is about 125 to 135% historical average. We're 90 to almost 100% full in those reservoirs. And then as we head through the central part of the state, New Melones, Don Pedro, San Luis, all about 85 to almost 100% full, well above average, everything looking really great to carry us through the dry summer and virtually no rain that we see during the summer or snow. Now, we talked about how that snow melt leads into many of our waterways. And you can about imagine that it's very cold. When we have releases coming from those reservoirs, they are releasing from the lowest part of the reservoir, which means the cold, dense water sinks to the bottom and they release that water, making our area waterways particularly cold. Look at this one, American River just below Folsom, 56 degrees. That's going to rival some of those Sierra and foothill waters between about 50 and 60 degrees. Lake Tahoe temperature even warmer than that at 65 for the Mid-Lake Buoy. That just shows you how much that snow melt can have an impact on our waterways. And when they do releases out of those reservoirs, it makes that water particularly cold immediately downstream. And that can have an effect when you go into the waterways. You can begin to lose control of not only your muscles, but it's difficult to breathe. It kind of takes your breath away. And for a moment, you just have to stop and say, okay, I'm okay, to gain your composure, because this is about the threshold that we're looking at right here for many of our waterways at this point. Cold water fact, kind of a scary one. Roughly 20% of people who fall in cold water die in the first minute of submersion due to cold water shock. And that's just because of losing control of kind of your breathing and your muscles and getting a bearing on your surroundings. So a couple of things to keep in mind can be life-saving. Near water, wear a life vest. Keep a close eye on children. Sometimes they're just playing by the side of the water, not realizing that the depth can really drop off rather quickly, especially on many of our rivers. Avoid alcohol and cold water hypothermia. Have to watch out for that. Also, fast flows make it tough for rescuers to know, okay, this is where the person had entry, but how fast are they floating down the river to get to them? So again, all this snow melt is adding, as well as the releases, to the cold water. Now, on the flip side of things, air quality is still looking pretty moderate in through our Wednesday, but under the ridge of high pressure, that tends to result in stagnant air. And it's going to be building in day by day here, meaning air quality is something else that we're going to have to keep an eye on, along with the dangerous heat. So it's air quality, fire danger, cold, fast waters, and the risk to people and pets as well. UV index is something that we keep an eye on. It's going to be about 10, both for our day to day into Wednesday and Thursday. We're just going to kind of keep it in that 10 threshold. It peaks between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. So what is UV index? Well, it's basically the sun damaging rays. That's what we have that peak. So you want to avoid those times unless you have SPF 30 on. Try to seek shade as much as possible. But sunscreen, the American Cancer Society says SPF of at least 30 or above. Also, you can wear a wide brim hat to protect your face and ears. And if you've seen it, they have some sun shirts, which are really great if you're going to be out for an extended period of time, and putting on sunscreen over and over is just kind of annoying. Get one of those sun shirts. That does help to protect from the sun. Take breaks in the shade. The risk for heat injury is high in these temps. So CDC recommends 35 minutes in the sun, 25 minutes break in the shade. And stay hydrated. Avoid those energy drinks and alcohol. You want to drink 1 cup of water every 20 minutes. And now, the one thing to keep in mind, I would say, if you still want to be outdoors during this time of year and this heat, the hottest time of the day between 4 and 6 o'clock in the afternoon. I know that's different than some places on the East Coast that hit it a little bit earlier in the day, but here in California, especially for the Central Valley, it is between 4 and 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And that's when that AC is going to be cranking, and it will go all the way through about 7, 8, even 9 o'clock when we have those overnight lows that aren't really going to be dropping off too much. You know that AC unit's going to be going pretty high steam. Now, for those of us that don't have air conditioning, I was one of them. Until a couple of years ago, we finally got AC, believe it or not, in the Central Valley. Have those whole house fans. You turn on those. So you want to do that roughly around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning when the temperatures start to drop off. Only use fans when in a room. They cool people, not rooms. Had a debate with my daughter about this, but it is true. Set your AC to 78 degrees. That can just take the edge off of those power bills when they come due. Close drapes and blinds. That helps to prevent that sunlight from coming in and warming a room. And don't use big appliances in the evening when those energy rates tend to be the highest. That's when you're going to pay a premium to run things. Now, we've been pretty lucky so far. Here's the rundown. We just got the climate summary from the beginning of the year, the first half of the year here. And you can see most of the months had below average temperatures. January and April were kind of the anomalies there, but February, March, May, and June, really some cool months in there. June in particular, we really struggled to warm things up, kind of feeling that summer heat. We only had one day that we had a 100-degree temperature. Usually we would have had a couple by then. July, we've had 2 so far, the hottest days being July 1st and 2nd. With 109 degrees. That's how we headed into our holiday weekend. And now we're going to be right back at it. So everything that you had to do over the holiday weekend for the July 4th holiday weekend, get ready to do it again. Downtown Sacramento, forecast high on Saturday, 110. Looks like that will be a record setter. Sacramento Executive, Stockton, and Modesto all kind of flirting with either being at that record or just slightly above it. Some of the impacts, like I said, check those hiking trails. Some of them, I think, in Southern California are closing due to the heat. Sacramento Zoo also closing at 1 p.m. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So if you're in the zoo, they're saying, okay, you can stay here until 2 o'clock, but we are closing the gates at 1 p.m. Need to keep not only people, but also pets safe. So it's too hot to trot. Look at some of these air temperatures. It only needs to be in the mid to upper 80s before that concrete gets to about 143 degrees by the end of the day. So the 5-second rule, 10-second rule, you want to hold the back of your palm on the concrete or the blacktop, wherever you're going to be walking your pet. And if it's too hot for the back of your hand, it is too hot for their little paws. Also, on a hot day, the car can get really hot. I mean, anybody that's sat their car out in the sunlight and you try to get in and touch that wheel, it gets really hot. So air temperatures with this kind of readings that we're going to be looking at 100, 105. It only takes about 10 minutes for that interior temperature to get to about 125 to 140. Look before you lock. That's just the bottom line on any of these days that we have temperatures that are in the mid-90s to the 100s. Major heat risk is going to be building. There's that risk growing Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That's really when we're seeing the peak of this stretch here. Major heat risk on Saturday. You can see the color contours really shaded throughout much of the valley. And then on Sunday, we actually see some of the foothills jumping into that extreme range. And at that point, this is the level that really you can't endure long periods of this type of environment, with the daytime highs deep into the 100s, the overnight lows only in the 70s and 80s. Really everyone affected at that point without adequate opportunity to get indoors with air conditioning. Heat exhaustion, know the signs with the heat illnesses. Heat exhaustion, thirsty, dizzy, nausea, cool, clammy skin, and sweating a lot. Now, when it drops a bit more into the danger zone, that becomes heat stroke. You got to call 911. Headache, red, hot, dry skin, no sweating. That is the danger zone. And these are the types of conditions where that is possible. So again, very likely that we're going to continue in this unseasonably warm weather pattern through much of the middle of July. Highs for tomorrow in the 70s for this year. We're in the 80s and 90s for the foothills. Across the coast, actually some pretty decent temperatures. San Francisco at 66 degrees, but it's once we head inland, we're going to start to see a couple of those 100s creeping into the forecast here. Calusa at 100. We're close to that for Patterson and Turlock. For the mountains, our 5-day regional forecast, 90s for the weekend, 100s for the foothills, and 70s for the coast. Our 10-day forecast, well, here it is, all laid out. Not much relief. The peak heat building by Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday of next week.